Hello everyone, welcome you to another video by Legacy IAS. Unlike the other videos where we generally talk of bills after they have been passed and then they have become acts, today we are going to talk about a particular bill which is actually open to public for their opinion and their judgments. So here we are going to talk about the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill 2022, which has been presented and the different facets which it involves. It's quite a lengthy and cumbersome bill for that matter, and we are going to try and understand all the important pointers and what are the different aspects that it's trying to cover. So in this particular video, you are going to get a lot of information, so I hope you're going to enjoy it. Now, basically what exactly has happened is that the Ministry of Electronics and IT, which is METI in short, okay, of the Government of India, that has released a draft of this Digital Personal Data Protection Bill of 2022. Here, the government is basically asking for public opinion and consultations on the bill, that people give their opinion, what they feel, the good, bad, the changes, anything that they have in this particular regard on the bill by December 17th. So we are looking at a good 20 days around time for the public to give their opinion. This particular feedback can be submitted on the MyGov website. Now, what is the rationale behind the bill? Firstly, we're doing it because we understand that Supreme Court has on multiple occasions highlighted the importance of privacy and that it's being a fundamental right. So accordingly, earlier as well, there had been a bill which was introduced in 2019, the Personal Data Protection Bill during the winter season in 2019. All right, now we are basically going to look at it has been reintroduced, and now the entire report and bill is now out in the public. It was re-examined and we are seeing the draft in this particular bill. Now, firstly, what is the objective of this bill? So the bill is supposed to outline the rights, the duties of whom? Of our citizens, or who are currently our digital nagriks. Because with e-governance, the way in which we have adapted to internet, telecommunication, as well as mobile phones, we all actually have categorized ourselves to be called as digital nagriks, while laying out the process as well as the rules for data collection when it comes to companies, right? So here we are looking at this bill which has a particular significance whereby penalties are being imposed for violations of any provisions that will be decided in the law, and this entire discussion of adjudication of these disputes and any punishment that has to be awarded, the data protection bill, a new kind of a data protection board is kind of proposed in this particular bill. All right, so here we are looking at altogether a new form of a dispute resolution in the matter of protection of privacy, and here these kind of boards, the orders that they have, these orders can further be challenged in the respective high courts. Now, if we look at this bill, the idea is that it seeks to establish a much more comprehensive legal framework as to how we are governing our digital personal data collection. All right, we have such a lot of data that is being stored on digital platforms, including the government websites like DigiLocker. So what do we kind of do in terms of their protection? So the bill provides for the processing of this particular data in a manner that recognizes the rights of the individual and their right to protect their personal data, their societal rights, and also the need to kind of process this data for lawful purposes. So this bill is trying to be very encompassing and very holistic in its attempt and its endeavor. Now, this particular bill has several new terminology, several new positions being introduced. We're going to talk about it one after the other. So first, when we speak of the data principle, basically a term which has been used in the bill, it is used to denote the individuals whose data are being collected. So if your data is being collected, you are the data principal in this regard. These data principals basically have the right to demand, to erase, and also correct the data collected by the data fiduciary. Will do what these data fiduciaries are, and they also have the right to nominate an individual who will exercise these rights in the event that that they die, and also they are incapable of acting as an efficient data principal. So such kind of refusal, rejection, and also transferring your rights is included in this particular discussion. Data processor is basically a person who processes the personal data on behalf of the data fiduciary. What is this significant data fiduciary mentioned in the bill? These are people basically who deal with this high volume of personal data. The central government basically defines them as, or someone as, data fiduciary based on a number of factors, all right, ranging from the volume of the personal data that they are having, and also the risk of harm that will possibly be taking on the sovereignty and integrity of the country. So the nature of the data that you're handling, the volume that you're handling, that kind of categorizes you into significant data fiduciaries. Otherwise, you're basically someone who is kind of handling a lot of these personal data. This particular bill also gives the consumers the right to file a complaint if you're not happy with the work of a data fiduciary, all right? And in this particular regard, the Data Protection Board is the one who is going to look into it as a first point of dispute redressal. Individuals also have the right to withdraw consent from a data fiduciary. Some of the aspects which are mentioned in the draft bill itself directly have been discussed here. Now, these particular data fiduciaries, what are their obligations? Basically, personal data can only be processed with consent or deemed consent. Okay, so it has to be consensual, cannot be forced, and cannot be hidden as well. Notice must be issued while seeking this particular consent, so it has to be done in a proper official manner. The proof of burden lies with this particular data fiduciary in the event of any dispute. Okay, now as far as the features of the bill are concerned, under this particular law, personal data is basically defined as any data by which or in relation to which an individual can be identified, which means that particular data is used to kind of identify you, that's very specific to you and particular to you. Also, there's a provision of cross-border data transfer, which means that you can allow cross-border storage as well as transfer of this particular data in order to of course, certain countries and territories, right? But the entire assessment of it is going to be done by the central government, which will be before such a notification has come out of cross-border data transfer. This bill also kind of makes a recognition of the fact that if you're looking at children, how do you deal with the data protection of children, particularly those who are minors under 18 years of age. So their parents or their lawful guardians are the ones who will be in this regard treated as data principals, because you're not giving them the right to decide. So the bill also ensures that individuals should be able to access this basic information in terms of, so that it's not linguistic or language agnostic, and it is in languages which are based on the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution, the one which talks about all the official languages. So it needs to be provided in all these languages which are there in the 8th schedule. The notice of this data collection needs to be in much more clear and understandable, comprehensible language. So you cannot complicate the terminologies, and at the same time you provide it in a language which is of course being recognized by the Constitution. There are several principles which this bill has kind of noted. Firstly, usage of personal data by organizations needs to be done in a manner that is lawful, fair, as well as transparent to individuals. Personal data must only be used for the purposes for which it is collected, which means data cannot be transferred without your consent, and you cannot use it for any other commercial or any other security activities. There is a focus on data minimization, very efficiently talked about in this particular bill. There is emphasis on how you need to ensure that the data you've collected is actually extremely accurate at the time of collection. Also, the way in which the personal data is collected and stored perpetually, this has to be for a limited period and for a fixed duration. There should be reasonable safeguards to ensure that there is no unauthorized usage of this particular personal data of yours. there is, kind of made stringent processes at different stages, and consent is being really focused upon in this regard. So the person who decides the purpose and the means of processing this particular personal data should be the one accountable for this particular processing. That is a very significant introduction which is being made. Now, we've constantly talked about this data protection board. Let us look at the features. Now, the central government is basically the one who has established or proposes to establish through this particular bill this Data Protection Board of India through a notification. Now, firstly, if you look at the members who will constitute this board, basically the number of members on the board and also the process for selecting, including the entire members as well as the chairman, are all going to be prescribed, and here the central government is going to take charge. So the management of the board will be entrusted on this particular chief executive, who will kind of oversee the entire thing, whose appointment as well as service of terms of service is going to be determined by the central government. Here we are looking at the executive taking a lot of action as far as the data protection is concerned when we're having the central government performing. Here, when we speak of other officers as well as employees, the board is going to consist of all of these other officers as well as employees. Again, the term of office, service conditions is going to be determined by the central government. All of these people put together, they will be elevated to the category of being recognized or treated as public servants. Now, the functions of this board include, firstly, that you have to ensure and look into complaints and see that if the authority is concerned, they have not complied with the procedures and the legislations which have been mentioned. Accordingly, the board, the Data Protection Board, can issue directions for non-compliance. The data breach mitigation has to be reduced, or rather the breach of data has to be reduced and mitigated. The necessary government orders have to be followed by this Data Protection Board, and here the entire investigation that has to be done by the Data Protection Board is through following certain procedures. They basically have to function as an independent body and take an action whenever a complaint has been filed. The inquiry needs to be done on the principles of natural justice. The board can seek the assistance of other executive officers like the police officers or any other officers of the government while doing their investigation. They can also in this regard issue interim orders if necessary to ensure and prevent non-compliance to any of the provisions of this particular act. So in this regard, every order that is basically coming out from the board shall have the status of being treated as a degree which has been pronounced by a civil court. So it has kind of a civilian justice system procedure which has been mentioned for the Data Protection Board of India. So these are some of the very important provisions of the draft bill which has come out and is open for the public to have a look and give their opinions. It's a very interesting initiative where we're looking at public participation and representative and participative democracy in the truest sense of the term, where people are really giving their informed opinion. It comes at a time when there's a realization that yes, today's public is very different from the way we were 75 years at the time of our independence, where our people are informed, educated and aware about what's happening and what's good for them. So this kind of a power of giving to the public is a very novel feature of citizen participation, and I hope you have enjoyed, liked and understood the discussions of this particular video. If you have, let me know by liking that, share it with those who still are not aware of the provisions of this video, and keep subscribing for future videos by Legacy IAS.